Good afternoon, college basketball fans. Yeah, I thought you'd hear Jeff saying that because he usually does, but my colleague Jeff Zink is out in beautiful. You're in Goodyear, right? Goodyear, Arizona.
Goodyear, Arizona, spring training camp of the Cincinnati Reds.
Yeah, and for our fans who don't know, Jeff you're an ambassador, aren't you, for the Cincinnati Reds Hall of Fame? Isn't that your official title?
That's the title, brother. Fancier than the job is, but I'll take it.
And he's out there right now working with the fantasy camp, and you're actually helping the Reds out, and you actually have a team out there. You're kind of helping out in the fantasy camp. How's your team been doing this week?
We're playing. We're playing hard. We're having fun. The W's haven't come our way, but it's a long thing. Tournament starts tomorrow, and that's where the real baseball starts. But if you're ever interested, talk to us down at the Hall of Fame. We got people come out for a week. It's a great time. You're going to hang out with former Reds as your coaches, get to play a lot of baseball, and experience spring in sunny Arizona.
All right, and baseball season is right around the corner. In fact, Jeff, you'll be happy to know here in Cincinnati, it feels like a nice spring day. Just look, it's 60-plus degrees outside. Of course, it's wet. Of course, that's the way spring usually is here in Cincinnati. But let's get back to basketball. That's why people tuned in to hear us. We are a little bit later in the day than we usually are. We try to do this broadcast at noon every Tuesday because of Jeff having some responsibilities out there in Arizona and being a little bit behind us on time. It's only 1 o'clock out there right now, Mountain Time. That's where you are, right?
1 o'clock, yeah. I would have loved to have done it at noon, but that was first pitch of our first game. So Jim Reaker would have been fine solo. I know some of you would rather have that, but you're stuck with me for the day.
Yeah. Me solo, then it would have gone on for an hour and a half. You usually try to get us wrapped up after 40 minutes or so. All right, let's get to basketball. The first thing I want to talk about is the rankings. And with Baylor going down to West Virginia early on, I think I called that one last week. I'm not sure. It was kind of up in the air. It's kind of up in the air. Who's going to be number one? And I actually, if I would have had to bet on it, I was going to bet on Kansas because look at Kansas. 1 loss, first game of the season, in Hawaii, overtime to Indiana, who at that time people thought was really good. So, I thought Kansas is probably going to get it. I thought maybe there would be some voters just because they're still undefeated and have a few decent wins, although they're all on neutral sites. Haven't beat anybody on the road, really. But I thought maybe Gonzaga would get the nod from a few of the voters, and they actually did. But I was surprised. The writers, anyway, the one that we follow, the AP, puts Villanova back at the top spot. I believe the coaches did pick Kansas. So what did you think about that? What was your surprise? What's your thoughts about those 3 or 4 teams? Of course, you throw UCLA in there. They've had a good year.
The problem is here, and we've talked about it several times, Jim, is it's one of those years where nobody's really separated themselves from the crowd, or even 2 and 3. Anybody in that top 10 could probably end up as number one or the champion. I think that close game with Kansas State probably threw a couple of voters off for Kansas. I was a little surprised, like you, to see Villanova leapfrogging, but a lot of people are in love with Villanova. And then to lose, to a Butler team that, came back and beat Xavier and had a tight one with Creighton, it's just anybody's ball game. As we've always say, it's not where you finish, and we're right now about in the middle of the season. Everybody's played about 15, 16 games. It's where you are at the end. So it doesn't surprise me. The thing you mentioned about Gonzaga, and that's always it. They're sitting there. They're the last unbeaten. We kind of both called it because you called Gonzaga because I gave you first pick, and I said whoever won that game, Gonzaga. So we're both right who the last undefeated is. But much like what your Muskies had to do a few years ago, they may have to move to a tougher conference to get a little more love in the rankings early in the year.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think about Gonzaga, and I think your analogy or comparison to the Muskies is very good. Back when the Muskies were in the A-10, you kind of knew that you maybe could take 1 or 2 losses in the non-com, but once you got into that conference, because the conference wasn't considered one of the top 6 or 7, they pretty much had to go undefeated to get some real national attention. I think Gonzaga's in the same spot. The problem with the Zags is, again, I think I mentioned it last week, I think the Big East is a perfect fit for them, except for location. I don't know how you put a team that's in Seattle, Washington in the Big East Conference, but they've done crazier things with the conferences. So that'll be something, I'm sure.
You're good.
You got a conference maybe like, I don't know, would the Pac-12 take Gonzaga? Kind of a different type of school. So I think they'll look at it, but I don't see any real clear-cut answers. Xavier just kind of got lucky the way things fell for them and Butler, that the Big East reorganized and they fit in perfectly.
Well, you're right. And Gonzaga, the other thing is there might be a little East Coast bias here with Nova over or Kansas and Gonzaga. It's like people say not many people play because they're always playing late at night, and UCLA's got the reputation even though they're out there. The other thing is, and Jim, because you were a college counselor for many years, and I did it, there aren't as many of those independent-type schools that go with athletics out there toward the West. You got some great schools like Reed and Oregon and all that, but they're not known for their athletics the way Gonzaga is. And that was the way for a long time until Mark Few got there. He decided to stay. So it's not a lot of options. Who knows what would go through there? I mean, you're right. The Pac-12 is more big public schools, as is the Mountain West. But the thing is, come tournament time, Mark Few's going to have them ready.
Oh yeah, they will be ready, and again, they might really surprise us and end the season undefeated and go through the NCAA tournament and win it. And again, I've said that I really don't think that'll happen this day and age. But probably if a team could do it, it would be a team like Gonzaga who doesn't have the ACC where you're playing somebody tough day in or week in, week out. Here's a question. If you put Gonzaga in the ACC or you put Gonzaga in the Big East or maybe even the Big Ten, would they go undefeated?
No. Yeah, you got to look. You're exactly right. You got to look at the league that they're in, and I don't see anybody able to stop them until they go to St. Mary's, which is one of their last few games of the year, if I remember. But you never know. They might slip up here and get caught looking ahead. The other rule of thumb is sometimes some coaches feel it's better off to get a loss or two under your belt, see how they react, rather than have that undefeated target on you going into tournament time.
Yeah, we could go back to, you remember, I think it was Kentucky just a couple years ago, was in the NCAA tournament and actually got to the Final Four and still undefeated. And I think the pressure got to them because everybody was saying, is this going to be one of the greatest teams ever? And especially with the young players of Coach Cal carries with him, I think it kind of was their undoing in the semifinals there, and they didn't even get to the final game that year. So yeah. I think you're absolutely right there.
Well, the best team doesn't always win. The hottest team might win, and when it's a one and out, a lot of things can happen. So that's number one. There's still a great bunch of great teams there in the top 10, and we'll be talking about this until the middle of March when they're picking pairings.
Exactly. Okay, well, change directions a little bit. Some incidents that happened in college basketball I wanted to deal with a little bit today and get your take on it. The first one I would deal with was I thought maybe one of the ugliest things that's happened in college basketball in a long time. There was an altercation on the floor between New Mexico and Colorado State. Game was played at Colorado State. It was actually it was a clean play, what I saw. It was a pick that was set, and there was some tempers. The game was really out of hand score-wise. A couple coaches came on the floor. They said to try to intervene so it didn't turn into a fight or a brawl, which it didn't, but there were some words said, and then it proceeded to go to the outside of the arena when New Mexico was actually leaving. Their bus was sitting in an area where the Colorado State players were leaving, and one of the Colorado State players and a coach, Terrence Rencher from New Mexico, they got into a verbal altercation. Of course, in this day and age, it was caught on Twitter, or somebody recorded it and posted on Twitter, and it went viral. I think you've had a chance to kind of look at that. I know you've been busy out there, but we talked about it earlier. What's your take on that? Because I got some real strong opinions on what happened, and actually I got some real strong opinions about how the Mountain West has handled this, because I don't think they've handled it very well.
And this is something, I'd be interested to hear you, because when we talked about some things earlier, there was some soft pedaling, like when we talked about Iowa and Coach McCaffrey and how he reacted with not shaking hands, and I know we got another incident of that and some other off-the-court things. you got to remember, first you're dealing with young men, highly strung, competitive. They go at it. Even out here, like I said, we're talking about these guys are 50 and they get competitive and you get into it. But you got to be able to pull back from that, and that's where the coach's reaction is the most. The most disturbing thing to me here is the coach following it up. He should be the one pulling the players aside, assistant, player, personnel development, whoever it is. If you're part of that team that the university hires to mentor those young men, you're the one that says, knock it off, get on the bus, and we'll talk about it when we get home. You're not the one that walks across the lot and says, hey, I'm going to stick up for my boys. And you hope that those, and you know how it is sometimes because you coach and, there's the coaches you like, there's the coaches you don't like, you get along with, but you would hope that the coaches would take control of that. Now, the Mountain West has basically deemed it pretty much a non-incident. They don't have to go any further. But I would hope that, and we've talked about this before, that the administration of the university sits down with that coach and says, not acceptable behavior for a member of our staff.
I totally agree. But I even go further. I think this assistant coach should face some discipline as far as suspension, maybe loss of part of his salary. Again, I think he was totally out of line. In fact, I don't think you should ever even talk to the players of the other team unless it's just a congratulatory, hey, that was a great game or something. But you should never have any words said between. You shouldn't say anything to the other team's players. And the Mountain West, I think, just really took a. They came out today. They said they have admonished both schools, but they're going to let them deal with the discipline, which I just think's taken away. I mean, what are they there for? This is an ugly scar in the Mountain West, and if you actually look at the Mountain West, they've had a lot of problems this year in games where they've had, I think they lead the country in technicals. They actually had a women's game where they had a fight break out where punches were thrown. And I think they're setting the precedent because they don't do something that people are not afraid to actually let these things get out of control. But, again, and in fact, early on, the Mountain West told both universities they did not want anything in the media while they were investigating this. And New Mexico came out and made a statement. And I'm thinking, well, they're not listening to you. So I'm really disappointed with New Mexico. I'm disappointed with the assistant coach and how he got involved in this. And I'm disappointed in the head coach because I think that head coach has set that assistant. Actually, there were two of them that went. First of all, they went out onto the floor, which they know is a rule. You don't walk out on the floor. And they got taken out of the game for that. But I think they should have some other, and maybe there will be. But, again, I think it's an ugly incident. You go back to the Xavier UC game, and again, the crosstown showdown's coming up, or shootout's coming up soon. But we go back to the 2011 fight they had, and again, I read Bill Cook's book, and one of the things that came out with everybody that was involved in that incident that he interviewed, that everybody said it was going to happen. I felt it was going to happen, and part of it was because the officials lost control of that game early on in some of the trash talk, and they didn't put an end to it right away. And they said it just built and built and built until it exploded. So, again, that's an unfortunate situation, but I'm very disappointed with New Mexico University. And if they want to come on our show and defend themselves, we invite them to. I'll give you the numbers. You could call in someday.
That's great. I don't think they're going to give us a second thought, but I agree with you. But, it's head coach first, and he should sit his assistant down and say, we love your passion, hold it on. And if he's not willing to do that, the AD needs to step in with both of them. If the AD's not going to, president of the university. And we talked about this earlier in the year, Jim. I'm sure you remember, like with Grayson Allen and a few other things. And now if it's off-the-court stuff, I think we agree, like Sindarius Thorwell and Miles Davis and some of these other things. Alonzo Trier, who Sean Miller's handling down in Arizona. Those are all off the court, and that's different. On the court, it's got to be the coach first. And if they're not willing to do something, you hope you got a strong commissioner. It is a highly volatile thing. And if all they did was say, hey, we're giving you a warning, next time I hope that they're harsher on it if there is one. Yeah.
Now we move to another situation that happened that wasn't as well publicized, but was in the Arizona State game.
Right.
Arizona State player Torian Graham, as he was walking off the floor after warm-up into the tunnel and was being booed by the Arizona fans, which, that happens in college arenas all the time, happened to give him the double bird as before he left the arena. Now, of course, again, they got to learn, hey, it's the social media era. Everything is being recorded. Everything will be on the Internet about 15 seconds after it's been taped. Now, he claims there were racial slurs being thrown at him, which, again, Torian Graham, I believe, is about 20, 21 years old. He actually was at Buffalo with Bobby Hurley and followed him out to Arizona State. So he's a young man, and, again, maybe his anger got the best of him. Now, in this situation, I think he has been disciplined by the coach, and he has actually come out and totally apologized, saying that what he did was wrong. And actually, his initial story was about the racial slurs. He has actually kind of omitted that from his apology, just saying, taking full responsibility. So I really kind of like the way that situation played out. It's an ugly situation, but again, it's a situation of reality in our society today. Again, we have issues. We know that. We watch the news every night. So, this is real life getting itself into these young men's lives. But again, it's something they have to deal with. And I think this one came out a little bit better. Your take on it?
I agree with you 100%. My take on this would be that you would hope in 2017, and we know it's not the case, but in 2017 that the whole racial element could be taken out of it. It's not. I mean, I look back in some of the research I was doing today for our trivia, in 1989, and this is 27 years ago, the Phoenix Suns refused to go to Miami because of social unrest that was caused by racial incidences. And that's an NBA game, and that was just in the community. But some people think that's the way to get under people's skin and psychology and all that. Hey, that's fine. Play your head games. But you don't use race or gender or transgender, not in this day and age. And if that's coming from the fans, I would hope, I agree with you. I think he handled it well. It's been a class act. And Bobby Hurley, who he was known as a bit of a hothead, so it's good that he handled that as a coach. But I would hope that everybody in every stand in America, when they hear that person say that they point, they grab security and go, that guy right there, get rid of him. Hope the other fans will stand up and say, we're not going to put up with that in our building.
And to give Arizona credit, in the accounts that I've read, they've done an investigation. They went to security guards that were in that area. They have said nobody heard anything. They've interviewed fans in that area. But, of course, one fan saying something, it could have, and maybe it was something was said that maybe he misinterpreted, and, again, it could have been a cultural thing too. Maybe something was said that he took as something else, and the person that said it, whether they meant it or not the way they did, or it was a code, who knows what happened. But again, I give Arizona credit for at least taking it seriously. And of course, I think all of the NCAA takes it seriously. Before every NCAA game, there is an announcement that if for sexist or racist or anything like that, you could be removed from the arena, which, and again, most places have security guards who are within earshot and watching most of the fans during the game to make sure things like that don't happen, especially in these highly charged rivalry games. And I think that's where all of these situations usually happen, when there's a lot of energy because of the outcome of the game and the relationship between the two schools.
Works all the way down. I hope they all follow the advice of John Wooden, the Wizard of Westward, who said, boys, we're going to win with class, we're going to lose with class. And he would take care of somebody if they weren't. It's just but not everybody's like that. So, I hope those incidences will get publicized and we'll have nothing more going on.
Third situation, I don't know if you found anything on this, and this is really kind of not that big of a deal, although I've always thought this is kind of interesting, the way the etiquette of the game has changed over the years. Used to be, I think, when I remember when you and I were young and watched basketball games, whether high school games, college games, everybody played till the final horn. And now it's kind of become that there's this understanding that if one team's way ahead, that, they kind of pull the ball out, especially if they have the shot clock, they let it run out, and then the team agrees and they don't play defense. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but it's kind of the way things are. But Tom Crean, who I've oftentimes been not very complimentary to his coaching. I have to give him credit for this situation. It wasn't, I guess, that big of a deal, but IU had a 19-point lead on Rutgers, I believe, got the rebound. There was about, I believe, 10 seconds left in the game as they brought it across half court. There was only actually about, I think, maybe one defender back. And the player attempted to throw an alley-oop, and actually I did a little research. The player was a freshman. So, again, I kind of give him a little bit of leeway there that, you know, maybe he didn't understand. I don't think he plays a whole lot. So he thought, and there was he tried to throw an alley-oop to OG on a newbie, one of IU's high flyers, and he actually missed the dunk. But immediately Green goes running out onto the floor to admonish Devontae Green. And again, I think, you know, nothing much was heard of. I think everybody looked at that and said, you know, Tom Crean thought that was not classy. He made sure his player knew that. Everybody was there who was watching on TV or in the arena still there, kind of saw what happened and knew what was going on and thought that Tom Crean did a very, very good job. Thoughts on that situation? I don't know if you found anything on that or even got a chance to see that out there in the desert.
I didn't, but it goes back to the thing I referenced earlier when Fran McCaffrey pulled the Iowa team, told them not to shake hands. That was because of the same thing. It was kind of the opposite. It was their team was trying to hold the ball, and their opponent stole the ball, went in for a bucket in a game that didn't matter. Like I say, I like the way Tom Crean's handling this better than Fran McCaffrey did right there in the Big Ten. Make it a teachable moment. I hope that Coach Crean, like you said, pulled his freshman aside and said, hey, we don't do that.
Yeah.
And probably also call the other coach and say, hey, I've talked to my boys. We apologize, you know, behind the scenes, off the record, whatever it is, and then move on. Because the one thing you don't want to happen, and this is like when you look at it, I mean, Arizona State and Arizona play each other again this week on Saturday. You don't want it to carry over to the next game because that's what happens. You referenced the UC Xavier game. Yeah, they felt that was going to explode, and it did that game, but it was a carryover for 3 or 4 seasons where things happened, and then they had the fight. So you just hope that they can calm it down and go from there.
I totally agree with you. Okay, you want to make a quick kind of a run through our different conferences, just if you want to pick some teams out to note, kind of where things are, and maybe anything that you want to just mention. We don't have to spend a lot of time. We're into the heart of conference play now, a lot of big games coming up. So how about if we start with the ACC? Give us your take on the ACC, one of the leagues that you follow a little more closely.
We could spend every week talking about them beating the crap out of each other. You know, like I said, Louisville topped Duke last weekend. North Carolina beat FSU. The big thing to watch this week, and it starts tomorrow night, is we're going to find out if Leonard Hamilton's Seminoles are for real in the ACC. They just got off to the hot start. And things often happen. You see in the rankings, South Carolina's back in the top 25. But Florida State, I mean, they have to host Notre Dame tomorrow night. Then they have to turn right around and go to Louisville and Rick Pitino on Saturday. And Notre Dame is just as hard. They'll play Florida State on the road, and then this time next week they have to host UVA. So you could sit there and talk about those guys. You also have Clemson, who's right on the cusp. I mean, they just barely lost to UVA. Notre Dame just barely beat Virginia Tech, and then Clemson has to go to Louisville in there as well. I'll just continue with mine. You go into the SEC. Big thing you have here is South Carolina back in the top 24. Have to travel to Rupp. That's probably about the only big, top 25 thing you're going to be until either of them plays Georgia if they're still in it.
All right. Hey, just to follow up a little bit on your ACC comment there, I like Notre Dame, and really why I like Notre Dame is they are an experienced team. They got a lot of older players who aren't 4 or 5 stars, and Mike Bray's just done an excellent job with them. And actually, they're the only team in that tough ACC that is still undefeated. And yeah, if tomorrow they go to Florida State and win, I'll be very, very impressed. The other thing I'd throw out there, of course, we've talked a lot about it, but I kind of alluded. I thought Duke's just got a lot going on. They're 2-3 right now. I think this might be one of those years, again, back when 20 years ago when Coach Krzyzewski took some time off, and they had one of their worst years in recent history. And I think they might be headed there again, except they got so much talent, but there's so many issues there with Coach K being out and Grayson Allen, who, had another incident since we talked, but I don't even want to talk about it, where he supposedly pushed the coach, which I watched that, and I didn't really see anything. And actually, the coach said it didn't happen.
The coach said that's nothing. That's just what you do to try to keep from getting people hurt. But we've talked about before. Grayson Allen, he's got a target on his back. He's under the microscope. And I don't think we really need – there's not much we're going to be able to talk about with Duke until Coach K comes back or see when he comes back.
And see where they are by the time he makes it back. They might be out of the race if they don't get things and get a few wins here in the near future. And the SEC, we said it before, the SEC is UK, although, again, this Saturday, and I think it's South Carolina goes to UK. That could be a big game if they would happen to pull that off at Rupp. I wouldn't predict that. And then they have to play Florida twice, home and away. Those might be challenges. The Gators are undefeated right now in the SEC. So, but again, as you said before, and I totally agree with you, the team is going to beat UK, and I think they will probably lose. And again, of course, they got that non-conference game with Kansas coming up at the end of January. Be a big game for them at Rupp to help their seeding, because again, part of their problem in playing the SEC, they're not getting a lot of big games because not a lot of ranking in the rest of the SEC. But again, if anybody's going to beat the Wildcats, it's going to be them themselves by not playing up to their potential or not playing together with all their talented young players.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear you. How about some of your boys? What's going on in the
Big East?
Big East, Big Ten, Big 12.
Well, Big East is kind of where we thought it would be, except, of course, the Musketeers that dropped 3 games in a row. Of course, who they lose it to? They lost to the 3 teams above them, which weren't, not to be half not a shock. And I think they got some issues that they're trying to get worked out. Nova, again, looks tough. Creighton looks tough. Butler looks tough. It's going to be a dogfight, although I give the advantage to Nova. The one thing I will mention that something that happened in the Xavier game might have a major impact on Creighton. I've talked a lot about Maurice Watson. He is the one that makes them go. He leads the nation in assists. He has about 9 assists a game. Well, if you saw the game yesterday, he hurt his knee, could not complete the game, was out after the first half, and they're not quite sure. There were some reports he may be done for the year, and that could really hurt how Creighton plays. Now, Creighton had to change their whole game plan on the fly, give Greg McDermott, Doug is his son that plays in the NBA.
Right.
Greg McDermott, lots of credit because he changed the way they played. He slowed the game down and went to his strengths with his shooters, because without Maurice Watson, they couldn't run like they like to out on the run and kicking the threes. So I give him a lot of credit because they come up with the win. Of course, part of that is the Xavier Musketeers. They got some soul searching to do and some things to figure out in the next week before they play the Georgetown Hoyas Sunday at home. But again, we'll probably talk more about that on Thursday with our Razorcast, where we focus on the Xavier Musketeers. Big 12, again, you got your big 3, Kansas, Baylor, West Virginia. Of course, West Virginia beat Baylor at West Virginia. That was to be expected. I got a chance to watch Kansas last night pretty much for an entire game, a game that it was at Iowa State, which was a game they have lost the last 2 seasons at Iowa State. And I was very impressed with them, and that was the first I'd really seen Frank Mason play, and he is maybe a candidate for Player of the Year. He makes that team go. They won that game at a very, very tough venue. And again, think about it. Kansas lost their first game in Hawaii in overtime, and that's their only loss. So, the fact that the coaches put them number 1 doesn't surprise me. Baylor, again, dangerous team, but they're going to, I think, take a couple losses. And West Virginia, with Huggy Bear's full court defense, and he wreaked havoc on Baylor. They had 31 turnovers. You're not going to win a game with 31 turnovers at West Virginia. So that's where the Big 12 is.
Yeah, and this time next week, you got the big Kansas traveling to Huggy Bear, and that's going to be a big game there.
That'll be a big game. What about the Pac-12? Your Arizona Wildcats that you picked, still 5-0.
Well, I'm telling you, this is the week where we're going to find out about them. Again, unfortunately, Alonzo Trier still not suiting up, and Sean Miller's not saying anything. It's due to a suspension for off the court issues, but respectfully, and I think this is the way it should be. We would do this with any other student in high school or college. It's a confidential matter, and the university's keeping it so, and that's got to be hard on them because he was one of the guys picked early in the season that might be the Pac-12 Player of the Year. But they've got a big week because Thursday they go to Southern California. Now they've dropped out of the top 25, but they could bounce back in. Then they turn right around and go to UCLA. Got a feeling they'll just stay there in Los Angeles. So that's 14 versus 3. And then it's after this week, but then they also have to play a game coming up against Arizona State again, and they'll have Oregon, and so this will be the time for Arizona State. Like I was saying, the rivalry games are always tough, so we'll find out how tough they are. In UCLA, of course, they've got to host Arizona on Saturday, and then next Wednesday they're going to have the big LA rivalry against Southern California. So lots of things going on. And when you look at it, the team right now that nobody's really talking about is the Utah Utes. They've played some good games. I know the Muskies had them. They're the ones that thumped USC to knock them out by 22, and UCLA just beat them by 1. So it's going to be interesting to see what goes on for there because Utah is going to host Oregon, and that's not until the 26th, so we might talk about that next week. So big doings there in the Pac-12. But that's another conference that, they know each other. They're going to play. They don't all play home and homes like the Big East does. Some of them will only have to play once. I think Arizona only plays Oregon the once this year. But it'll be interesting to see where they are by the middle of February.
Yeah, that's the thing with most of these super conferences is that they have multiple members, 14, 15 members. So sometimes they play teams twice, and other teams they only play once, which we call an unbalanced schedule. And sometimes who you get twice and who you don't have to play twice may lead to who wins it. I would just say at the end of our discussion here about the Pac-12 is every time I watch Lonzo ball, he just amazes me. He makes everybody – who he reminds me of is Magic Johnson. He makes everybody else on the floor better when he's on the floor. And he doesn't have to score, but he can help other people score. Or if he has to, he will score. So he's another one I think. He's just impressed me, and he might be the number one pick in the NBA because I see him, especially with his size, is having a big future in the NBA. I don't see him having a Bruin name on his chest after this year, although he's got a couple brothers, I think.
I was going to say, he's got 2 brothers that have already committed to Steve Alford out there, so there'll be a ball in uniform for a while in L.A. What about the Big Ten, Jim? Because we got to get to these things. Guys are starting to gather for our afternoon game, so I've got to get through this.
Big Ten, I could talk about real quick. Actually, Maryland and Wisconsin's at the top. Big Ten is I think by far of the 6 we talk about the weakest. It's going to come down, I think, between Wisconsin and Maryland. I'm going to give the favor to Wisconsin, as I said in the beginning. And Michigan State thought they were maybe starting to get things together, but then they lost to Ohio State, their Ohio State's first win the other day. So, Miles Bridges, he's a freshman that they kind of lean on, and I just don't think he can he's a freshman, and I'm not sure he might be there another year. He's not quite seasoned. Of course, he missed a bunch of games because of injury.
Yeah, he got hurt a little bit there, so he might just be rounding back into shape.
All right, real quick, since I know you got to get back out on the baseball field out there, we'll do our Fort Wayne Mastodons update. They lost this week. They lost to the top team right now in the Summit League, 66-63. Their record's at 14-5, and I think they're going to have to win that Summit tournament now to get an NCAA bid so they can make noise in March, like I predicted back in November. All right, you got anything before me? I got a quick trivia for you today, but you got anything before me before we wrap it up here?
Well, yeah, I got a couple things to know. Today is the birthday of 2 people that we said baseball. Since we're down in baseball, I thought I'd bring that in here. Like so, we talk about One is the birthday of Arnold Rothstein, 1882, the fixer of the 1919 World Series, big gambler. And also closer to home in Cincinnati, somebody we always miss. On this day in 1931, Don Zimmer from the big west side of Cincinnati, longtime coach and player and manager in Major League Baseball, was born. But I have a trivia question for you this time. See how you go.
Probably
Today
not well.
is the anniversary of Super Bowl V. And that was the game. Super Bowl V. Baltimore Colts won 16-13 on a last-second field goal. And Chuck Howley was the MVP of Dallas. It's the only time a losing player is named the MVP because they had to get the votes in before the end of the game. They've since changed that. Some people call this the Blunder Bowl. It's the first on artificial turf and the first after the official merger. But the Blunder Bowl is because there were 11 turnovers, including 7 by Baltimore, who won. Dallas had 133 yards of penalty yards. But anyway, it was a 32-yard kick with just 5 seconds left by a fellow named Jim O'Brien. I'm not going far afield, though, but I think you have a good idea. Jim O'Brien played basketball and football for what university?
One of your alma maters, the University of Cincinnati.
That is correct, Jim, and that's when they got through to him for college basketball. He was kicker on that team and played, but he also played basketball for Tay Baker while he was there. Didn't contribute much, but he was on the squad.
Actually,
all
when
right,
you started that, I knew where you were going with that. I thought you were going to just ask me his name, and I even knew that. So, all right, real easy one for you today, I thought. And again, as I always do, try to relate it to something going on today or we've talked about. So, real easy. You're in Arizona. How many national basketball NCAA championships have there been from the state of Arizona?
From the state. Now, you threw the curveball in there.
Because you're doing baseball, so I thought you needed a curveball. Can't throw that fastball all the time. Can't give you cream puffs to hit out of the park every time.
Well, I'm sure I'm going to get this wrong, but I think it's just the one from Lute Olson, who took a long time to get there when he coached in Arizona. But there's probably some college in here that won early that I don't know about. But I'll go with one.
You are correct. Actually, I was trying to play off of that, make it so easy that you would think and you would guess. Yeah, 1997, the Arizona Wildcats defeated the Kentucky Wildcats under Lute Olson, and that's the only national basketball championship to come out of the state. Yeah, I threw that in just to make you think, but it didn't get you. It was a curveball that didn't break enough.
I just fouled it off a little bit. But the other thing is there aren't a whole lot of universities down here in Arizona, so it doesn't take you long to go through them. So anyway, yeah. I'm going to jump off now, Jim. I'll let you say the goodbyes as I walk over to my dugout and get with my guys, and we'll talk to you on Thursday.
All right. We'll see you then, and have a good day out there. All right, I'd like to finish by thanking my good pastor of the Grueling Truth and allowing us to do this podcast. Thanks to all of you that pick us up every week and tell your friends about it. And we'll see you. We'll be on the air again next Tuesday with our recording. And if you want to listen to our Razorcast, which we record at about noon every Thursday, and that's on the Grueling Truth Network also. So with that, I'll say goodbye.